Welcome to We Might Be Nerds, a podcast about everything from entertainment and technology to science and history. I'm your host, Dylan Critchfield.
And I'm Kyle Montgomery.
And we are joined again this week by Sarah Critchfield.
Hi.
And Jacob Montgomery.
Hey, what's up, guys?
Joining us again from last week's episode. So this week, it's been Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving has passed for us, and for you, of course, listening to this in the future. But in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we thought we'd kind of do a potluck-style episode of topics. Everybody here has brought some sort of topic to the table to discuss, and we're just going to go around the table and see what's for dinner, so to speak.
A veritable smorgasbord of an episode. There's all sorts of stuff mixed in here. It's going to be tasty, I guess.
Yeah, we actually... for the most part, we don't know one another's topics. So this is going to be pretty interesting for us and hopefully for you as well. So, Kyle, did you want to start us off?
Sure.
So yours is the appetizer.
The appetizer, the amuse-bouche, palate.
Gosh. You already
palate
said
cleanser.
smorgasbord, now you're saying amuse-bouche.
No, there's too much food going on here. We need to talk about nerdy stuff. Anyway, the nerdy thing that I'm going to be bringing to the table today for us to discuss is the Uncanny Valley.
Ooh.
Which is defined as a psychological theory, whereas something starts to look more human-like. There's a point at which people start to feel it doesn't look right at all, and they start developing these adverse feelings towards an object.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. If you've ever seen like Japanese robots before, like the really old ones where they don't look human-like at all, they're like kind of got a shielded kind of face thing like that. They don't really look like a person, so those feel more believable for some reason than something that is made to be like an exact model of someone that is just kind of put onto this robot and it moves around. There's something in our brain that kind of triggers this reaction that, hey, this looks like a human, but something's not right with it.
All right.
Oh, so like the wax, like a wax figure, somebody gets closer to that valley, right? Or it's on the other side, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but then when it's moving, it's even worse.
Yeah, especially if it's moving. There's a point. There's kind of a charted scale of how believable something is, or like how familiar something is going to look. And if it gets more familiar over time, and you're heading towards from being like an industrial robot up to being a perfectly healthy person, there's a point where everything just drops completely below. And so we have like someone like a human kind of person moving around who's completely dead, of course, is a zombie.
Yeah.
And that's about the lowest point of this chart is like something that looks like a zombie.
So yeah, I remember what you were talking about with the Japanese robots. I don't remember when it was. I want to say it was about 2011, 2013, in that time frame. Japan had these robots that were ambulatory, but they were made to look like real people, but the movement of them and the mannerisms of their motion was completely wrong, and like it instills a very real discomfort. Like you can kind of feel it in your chest if you just even watch them on video. That's kind of the phenomenon we're talking about with like moving objects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, does it apply to stationary objects as well? It's been a while since I've read up on Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, it does apply to a stationary object. Like if you have a stuffed animal or something like that, it's gonna look a lot. It's not gonna be as familiar, but it's still gonna be something that you identify with. It has eyes, it has a nose, it has a mouth. It's got a face, and we're trained to recognize faces. But as soon as those start to shift towards faces like ourselves, because we're so programmed to be around other humans, other people that are our species, That as soon as it starts crossing that line, that's when we really have a problem. It doesn't. If it's an animal, it's no problem. If it's a human that is obviously wrong, like you're watching a certain cartoon or something like that, the one I think of, that's kind of like it feels like a caricature of a human is like the movie Disney's movie The Incredibles, where
Hmm.
the characters
It's like
are
very like
obviously human,
stylized.
but
Yeah.
it's very stylized. It's not meant to be photorealistic, and you don't have that problem like some movie studios have had before in trying to make things as looking so much like humans as possible. And it's gone as far as to ruin a movie studio completely.
Really? Because, like, I know what you're talking about with Incredibles, and that kind of era of animation was one in which most of the 3D animated movies, that was the same time as stuff like Ice Age and a bunch of animated movies that focused on non-humans. And if there were humans, like the Incredibles, they were more caricature-esque because the further you get away from a human being, the easier it is to avoid the uncanny valley effect.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting you bring up Ice Age. I remember in that movie, it's been forever since I've seen that, but there is like a human character in that, but it's like this little boy,
Yep.
and he doesn't have very realistic features. He's got kind of not kind of matted hair and stuff like that, really round face, big giant eyes. I mean, very stylized, very cartoonish, very not real.
Yeah, and let's instead of like avoiding the uncanny valley, let's talk about some things that are like in the uncanny valley that like we can identify. I know there were some issues with some video games back in the day that supposedly got too close. I think that some of the early Call of Duties, like Call of Duty 3 and 4, some people had some issues with the animations of the faces.
Hmm.
Halo 3, the was it Lord Hood, had a very odd face in particular that kind of like that face made me uncomfortable. I want to look at, you've provided a very good chart that I'm going to provide in the show notes, but like I'm trying to think of something that besides like these robots that actually um, illustrates the effects that like you can actually look at it
Yeah, I
and
mean, not
Hmm.
like
like get
movie
that effect.
wise. There's like the early like mocap of like actual people,
Uh
and
huh.
they're trying to do like a 1-to-1 like Polar Express was like,
Oh,
Oh,
and
for
that's like
sure.
probably the worst one because they try to make everybody look human, and it's like the faces are close but they don't move. They really seem like stilted, and it's yeah, just kind of unnerving. Versus like Gollum, which is around the same time. But he's like really cartoonish. I mean, he's not like he does look real, but he has really big eyes and he's like far enough looking like a human that it's not as unnerving as like the Polar Express or even like the first Toy Story when they show the humans a couple times. Like they kind of
You
try to
mean
make him look
Andy everywhere?
yeah, oh. He looks so much better on like yeah, the third one. I
Yep.
feel like yeah, they make him more cartoony on that instead of trying to look real.
and even in modern animated films, like where there are humans, stuff like Tangled or Frozen, the characters are still stylized to a degree. They're approaching that human appearance, but they're still obviously stylized in subtle ways, I think explicitly to avoid the effect of the uncanny valley.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Jake, you hit the bullseye when you were talking about Polar Express because it was that particular animation studio that ended up shutting down because of a series of movies that they ended up making. The
Really?
studio, yes, this was one headed up by Robert Zemeckis. He was really an influential movie director, very popular.
He's huge,
But
yeah.
he headed up this studio called Image Movers. And their first movie that they did was The Polar Express. And that's when as soon as they started putting that out, because they had tried to make things so photorealistic. I mean, that was their aim. They kept getting all these movie reviews that over and over would talk about the uh, characters being disconcerting, really horrifying, dead-eyed, creepy.
Yeah.
and they ended up putting out multiple movies. They did the Polar Express. They did a version of Beowulf. They did the Disney's A Christmas Carol, the one with Jim Carrey. I really do like that movie, but I understand where everyone's coming from with it being just absolutely creeping and everyone looking uh, dead-eyed and like a doll and
Yeah, kind of like
just.
stilted. Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the dead eyes is a big part.
right.
Yeah, one of the biggest box office bombs in history ended up being the 2011 film Mars Needs Moms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which I remember seeing previews for that, and it was like, nope, I'm not going to see this. But that was also by Image Movers,
Huh.
and that was the one that ended up putting them under. They had a run of a couple movies, and then that was it because they focused on photorealism, and everyone was turned off by it.
Yeah, like the dead eyes effect. Speaking of Polar Express, I've never seen the full movie, but I've seen a couple of like gifs or what have you of the like the really smarmy kid. And like when you mentioned the dead eyes, that was the first image that popped into my head. Like, and that's also something that stood out to me about the robots that Japan was experimenting with in the early 2010s is that it's lifelike, but is very obviously not alive. Is that a contributing factor to Uncanny Valley in terms of like visuals?
Yeah, we're so trained to see visual cues from humans.
Yeah, especially around the eyes, I feel like.
Yeah, make eye contact.
Yeah,
Right.
in our psychology, we're looking for approachable humans, people that we can actually relate with, talk to, and if depending, on gender or whatever kind of circumstances, possibly consider them as like a mate or something like that.
Yeah.
And if they look like they have issues based on the outward features
Like
of the
having no soul.
person, yeah, like having no soul and eyes that don't move and just things that make a human human, then we notice that kind of thing immediately. Whereas if you made a robot that looked like, a cute little baby or something like that, with like really rounded
Ugh.
cheeks and like a caricature of a baby, we wouldn't have nearly the effect that like a full size human robot android thing would end up
Right.
being. It just ends up creepy.
Yeah, because like in Wally, I think that's like an example of a robot that's cute. Like he has arms and eyes. He emotes by like moving his little like camera lens eyes.
Lenses.
Yeah.
But he's
It's
so
cute.
far from looking like a human, but he has like characteristics of a human that people think he's cute. He avoids that valley as opposed to like these lifelike robots or 3D
Yeah, because he's
animation trying to
obviously not
replicate a
human.
human. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, like the being obviously not human. Like in the past 10 years, we see a lot of robots in industry now doing certain tasks, and every single one of them invariably goes as far away from human as possible. And I'm going to reference again. I think I referenced it a couple weeks ago. The CGP Cray video, "Humans Need Not Apply," which talks about the automation age. It references a robot that can like use AI to learn and stuff. But one of the things that stood out to me about that robot is it had a tablet for a face with just a couple of eyes and maybe a mouth, but they're obviously drawn on. It's not going for that human like appearance. And I think
Okay.
that's something that like manufacturers and companies have learned to avoid is like don't go for humanoid because it's going to make people upset. And Jake and you and I talked about this a while ago. The Uncanny Valley, it may not be only visual. Like, think of the voice assistants we have, like your
Hmm.
Alexa, your Siri, your Google Assistant. Like, I
Yeah,
don't
Cortana,
interact
I
with
guess.
those.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cortana.
No.
I don't interact with those because, like, it's a human sounding voice, but the syntax and the inflection is so obviously non human. I find interacting with those things uncomfortable. Do you guys get any of that? Am I alone in this?
No, 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 no. You're not alone with that. I feel that is just something that is once again in our human nature, and not everyone is affected by it. I may have generalized and said that everyone's affected by this kind of thing, but it's very selective.
So, does part of the psychology of this uncanny valley, is it that humans are afraid of being replaced by robots, so anything that looks more and more human makes them feel even more easily replaceable?
I don't
Is
think that
that part of it?
I don't think that's a part of the research, because the Uncanny Valley research began in the 90s before automation and robots that looked like humans, much less robots taking jobs, was really a major concern outside of like manufacturing plants. Anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's even considered in the
Well, I
research
mean, there's
later
like
on.
some sci-fi, like like the Terminator movies that kind
Oh
of
yeah,
address that kind of fear. But like from what I remember, it's like you can tell like when something's not right with somebody, that means like they're unhealthy. So it's kind of like a evolutionary like instinct to like try to avoid things that don't look like they're correct and healthy. I guess is what I remember.
yeah, because like we
Yeah,
can look at a person and tell, hey, they're feeling rough, or like, hey, they're tired. We can see the bags under your eyes, or hey, your breathing pattern is weird. You're moving weird. You look like you're really dragging. We can tell those features of a human being. But when you have like every bad signal coming out of a thing that looks like a human that you can get from a human, and then even more things that are wrong, I think that's like Uncanny Valley in a nutshell in regards to things that look human but aren't.
yep. I believe that's the psychology that's really behind it, kind of the main bullet points. But amazingly, we've actually been dealing with this much longer than the 90s. I feel like this has really surfaced in the 90s due to advances in animation, especially.
Like Toy
But
Story
we've
especially
been dealing
becoming a
with,
big thing.
oh, yeah. But this was hypothesized all the way back in 1970 by a
Really?
roboticist named Matsuhiro Mori.
Huh.
So, I mean, it would make sense that they would be having this same kind of problem, and people would, Japan was a very progressive country in terms of technology, even way back when. That was really there when they had the limelight. And I can totally understand that this is where the problem could have been conceptualized because, robots are a pipe dream. And why not try to shoot for the moon and make one that looks like a human? And
I can definitely see him messing
oh,
with those kinds of
that could backfire.
animatronics and that time. Yeah. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, Uncanny Valley is an interesting phenomenon that we're certainly not through with, though. Like Imagination Studios, I can definitely see somebody trying something that like that again, considering the massive advance in 3D graphics technology, especially in the Hollywood side that we've seen in the past decade or so. I don't think we've seen or heard the last of it. Even video games, or and especially the voice assistants. That stuff creeps me out.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't creep me out as much as like the visual stuff, but yeah, I definitely see what you're getting at. But yeah, I think it's just like Kyle said, it's just everyone can, process those things a little bit differently. So what like totally freaks out somebody might mildly freak out another person.
Yeah, I don't know if this came up in your articles or anything like that, but the people who aren't affected by Uncanny Valley, is there like anything that associates them with like a pseudo immunity from the effect?
This is a good pause to have right here. I'm going to take a look at that.
Kyle.
All right, let me see if I have
Kyle.
for you guys. Okay.
If you don't have an answer, you can just say no and we can move on. It's not a big deal. I'm just
I mean,
curious.
I have like basically just one point to it.
Yeah,
So,
because like it came to mind because like to me like people who don't care about people like sociopaths
Yeah.
and not being affected by Uncanny Valley would make sense to me. I just didn't know if there was anything in the research that suggested any such common traits amongst people who weren't affected.
no, not necessarily it in terms of like if someone has a defect with their psychology or something like that. But I have seen that it can vary between different cultures and different backgrounds. Some
Hmm.
people perceive n- human motion or human emotions completely differently than, say, us living here. We have
In
our own
America, yeah.
customs. Yeah. So that may be really the one of the few differences in how we perceive the uncanny valley.
Neat. I didn't know half that stuff. Wow. Like, the culture
Yeah.
can play into how people do or do not perceive the effect of Uncanny Valley. That's something I'd definitely be interested in reading more on. And you
Yeah.
have some links and references we can put in the show notes, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
You gave us a very good chart that I'm going to be putting in there as well, so thank you for
Yeah.
that.
Good topic. Good way to start.
Mm-hmm.
Good appetizer. I'm hungry for more information now. That may be
Yep.
the cheesiest thing I've ever said on this show.
I'm gonna take a nap. No.
But you haven't had your main course yet.
You haven't had the turkey, Jake.
Oh,
So which one of you brought the turkey?
I gotta put a little bit of dressing on top. Hold
let's do
on.
some small plates.
Hold on. What's going on, Kyle? What
What's this
dressing you
dressing?
bringing?
So I got a real question about the uncanny valley for you guys.
A
Do
real
you
question.
think that we're with all these advances in animation and the kind of processing power and uh, just that computers are getting better, do you think we're slowly lifting ourselves out of the uncanny valley, or do you think that this is going to be a problem we're going to continue to have for the rest of the foreseeable future?
I think like they'll definitely get better as like they can with like the motion capture being able to capture more points on a face because I feel like like with the uncanny valley it's so much about at least like with the face there's so many like tiny minuscule like muscle
missing data
movements.
points.
Yeah, there's so many like muscles in your face and just subtle things like the way your eyes move, the way your brows furrow, and yeah. So I feel like it will get better. I don't know if like in our lifetime if it'll be like a 1-to-1. Like you can't tell the difference between like a live video and an animated video, but I mean it has to get closer.
Yeah, but I feel like we're much further than we were 10 years ago,
Yeah.
15 years ago.
Even like I don't know if you guys saw like Rogue One where they had that guy that played Grand Moff Tarkin that actually died,
Oh
like
yeah,
after
I
the
forgot about
Yeah.
that.
Return of the Jedi, yeah. But they had him on there as like, a 3D model, and I think they used like old pictures as like references, but it was definitely closer than like the Polar Express.
Yeah, I remember seeing that
Yeah.
now, and it was closer, but it was still off.
It was still, yeah, you could tell it
Off.
was off. Or like the Carrie Fisher stuff in the Rise of Skywalker. There were some parts of that.
Yeah, but those are definitely on the other side of the Uncanny Valley going back
Right.
up.
Yeah. Yeah, because you'll post this chart, but yeah, there's like it's called a valley because there's like a huge dip in the middle where it gets really close, and then it asymptotes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the close but not close enough to be
Yeah.
fully convincing. I think
Right.
I think we're going to see it crop up that people are going to try things like they did in Rogue One and Star Wars, and they're going to get better at it. But I feel like it's going to be used very sparingly, and only in live action. I think in actual animation, they're not going to try it again until they have had a convincing, fully synthetic person in a live action film. I think until then, animation is going to continue down the stylized route it has for the past 10 years, specifically because it avoids the problem altogether. And why risk causing the problem when you can avoid it? And it maintains a lot of the appeal of like classic styles of animation anyway. I feel like most companies will try to avoid it in terms of animation in movies. As far as robotics and personal assistants and whatnot, I got no clue.
Yeah, I think we're coming a lot closer with like video games and movies may try it again, but I mean they really have to pay a lot of close attention. I mean, we even had this kind of issue with the Sonic the Hedgehog movie that came out with the first iteration of Sonic being, with like human eyes, human teeth, stuff like that.
Let's not speak of the abomination.
Oh, exactly.
That's a good example, though.
This is a good example, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, where the resulting Sonic ended up being a lot more cute, bigger eyes, less human-like features, and was a lot more acceptable.
Yeah, more obviously animated. It didn't have as much to do with being as true to the source material, or although that's what the petitions were about. but like the original trailer that released was very upsetting. I mean,
It was
it was
horrifying.
it was this blue humanoid hedgehog with human teeth. Oh,
It was pretty gross.
You reminded me of a movie from 2002 that was about a synthetic actress, Simone. Had Al Pacino in it, and he creates this fake person as an actress because nobody would work with him, and just all the very bad things that happen because of this. But yeah, she was very unappealing because you could just tell she was off. So that might be one to watch. 2002 Simone.
Simone. Okay.
Or
Huh.
Sim
Oh, wow.
1.
Yeah, I do think it's so interesting how like you can't really even explain like precisely what's wrong with it. You just like inherently know something's not right about this.
Yes.
yeah, and I think that's a lot of what I'm talking about with like the voice assistants and how they respond. How it's kind of disjointed. Like it sounds human, but it's off in a way that is somehow tangible, and it just makes me feel like I want to avoid this interaction in the future.
So give us back Microsoft Sam and you're good.
Honestly, yes. Any of the old text-to-speech technologies, in terms of having it speak to me, would be preferable. Give me Bonzi Buddy. I don't care. Just give me something that doesn't sound as human.
Speak and spell.
Please.
AEIOU.
Thank you. I don't know.
Anyways. Yeah.
Anyway. All
Yep.
right.
If you want to have a little bit of fun, and since I know that this is on, if you have Disney Plus or something like that, a really good early version of having something with the Uncanny Valley is from a short film called Tin Toy. Came out in 1988, and as soon as the baby walks in, you're gonna have a fun ride. So yeah, 1988, Tin Toy. It's on Disney Plus.
Or if
All
you
right.
don't want to actually watch any of these videos fully, you can probably find relevant clips on YouTube and spend much less of your time feeling much less uncomfortable.
Or a picture.
Go
Let's
go
into that.
all the way.
Dive in that valley.
Please don't.
That's uncanny.
That's a hell of an appetizer topic. Hell yes.
Do you have room for the main course?
That may have been the main course, actually. That was...
Well, dang, I'm sorry.
we kind
to
of
spoil
dove
you.
into it. It's the turkey. Kyle brought the turkey. Heck yeah.
We brought
Sweet.
turkey appetizers.
We already had a
Kept going
turkey.
back
You
for
brought
more.
another one.
Turkey. I am a turkey. That's what I am.
Well, who brought the next...
Yes.
Who brought the cranberries or whatever?
I've just got bread, so you guys hit up that
You have
turkey.
stuffing.
I
Stuffing.
like bread though.
No, we can't have
Berries and cream.
multiple breads. Berries and cream, though, we can have plenty of.
We won't get into that one though.
No, we won't. All right.
Oh yeah, so mine is actually something that I think we're all kind of familiar with, and it was I don't know, I just found it really interesting getting so into something that seems so mundane. So mine was I didn't realize there's adults that do Pinewood Derby cars.
What?
Wait, really?
Yes. Yes.
Like I understand like.
I mean, no, not just like
models.
your dad doing it for you, like adults, like racing leagues for
Really?
Pinewood Derby
Actual,
cars.
like,
This
Yes.
is a thing? Because, like, we did it in
like Boy
Scouts and
Scouts of
Huddle.
America sanctioned Pinewood Derby
Or
cars.
Girl Scouts. Girl Scouts do Pinewood Derby, too.
Right, yeah,
that's what I was
Sarah's
gonna
adult
say,
cars.
Good for that. Okay, cool.
And
Because
Sarah,
I know we're all familiar with it. Yeah, we've all.
These are things I wish I would.
I've got Pinewood Derby cars right over
Right,
there.
yeah. You have 2 Girl Scouts. We were all in Cub Scouts, is who
Yeah.
does it. But yeah, and I just found it like really interesting. And I want to go into like a little bit of like the physics behind how people try to get every last like millisecond.
please
off the
tell
time
me you
for a
have a
car.
link and give it to me now.
Yes, please.
I
Oh, yeah, there is-
need it.
I will get it for you.
The closest thing I've seen to this was Mark Rober, ex-NASA engineer, did a video on making an unfair Pinewood Derby car, but I think he took it to like a Cub Scout thing. I didn't realize that adult racing leagues were a thing. I will put that video in the show notes, by the way. That's
Yeah, that, I mean, yeah, and that was like kind of got me on it. Like, I don't know if I really want to talk about that so much, but just like
yeah,
getting into like the physics of it, because, obviously, like a kid, they want to make the car look cool, and if they win, it's, they would be happy, but I don't think necessarily kids go into it.
Yeah, they
Like,
were just happy that their car made it to the end of the track.
and there's like
right,
style
and like they
trophies and stuff.
make it like look
Yeah.
fast, like it has a cool spoiler on it, or it looks like a sports car, but so yeah, I'll send you that.
I like just thinking of like an adult who just strolls into like a Pinewood Derby race or something like that. Move over, kid. And
Yeah, there is one where this guy just walks into it.
You whippersnapper, let me show you how this is done.
So I guess I don't know if we should even people can look up what, like, if they don't know what a Pinewood Derby car is, they should go look. Basically, it's something that started actually in the 1950s. Because apparently Boy Scouts used to do soapbox racing,
Yeah,
which is
soapbox
like
cars.
a wooden, soapbox, and they turn into a car. And this dad had a Cub Scout, and his kid was too young for it because you don't want to put a 6-year-old in charge of a vehicle that's going downhill.
Yeah,
And doesn't have very good braking capability. So he came up with the idea of doing,
so good.
basically it's a little bigger than a Matchbox or a Hot Wheels, but not much.
it's about I think 10 inches long,
like-
about 2 inches wide,
It's
and about an
like
inch thick.
7 inches long and about 2 wide.
Yeah,
about as tall. Yeah.
Yeah, apparently, the max length is 7 inches. The max width with the wheels is 2 1/4, from what I can see here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they fit
So-
into a track, and it's got
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it said anywhere from 2 to 8 tracks, and they all start on the top of a hill. And the only thing that powers them is gravity.
Yeah.
And the ones I've seen mostly they have little metal pins in front of each car.
Mm-hmm.
And they just release all of them at the same time, and they're just trying to get to down the slope and then down a long flat track to see who gets to the finish line first.
Quick sidebar. So because it has I never knew it had its roots in soapbox car racing. So
Yes.
literally the reason that the Pinewood Derby does that is because it's the same driving force of the car as in a soapbox car situation. Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, because soapbox cars, I mean, I don't know a lot about it because obviously now everything comes in a cardboard box, but
Yeah, and we've never
there's
done
a
that.
wooden box, that you could put wheels on, and I think you could steer it and brake it. I don't think it had any other kind of locomotion besides just gravity pulling it down a hill. And so that's where it started. But it just,
Oh my gosh.
and I will link the
Poor-
video too,
poor
where it's this guy
generation
explaining how he tried to make
that.
what was that,
Be
Kyle?
like a 7-year-old and go down the hill in this really rickety box. I want to do that. Get myself hurt
That
really
just doesn't
badly.
fly today.
No, we hardly let our kids go outside.
We don't let them go outside at all right now because of Rona, but that's besides
Oh
the point.
yeah,
That's a
Rona,
whole
we're
different
living in
topic.
those Rona times. Ooh.
But the main video that I saw, just kind of going down a rabbit hole on YouTube watching interesting stuff, was by this guy named Mark Rober, that I think is a engineer, and he does a lot of videos about the Pinewood Derby, or he was showing, there's a bunch of videos he does about why you can't win at carnival games.
Yeah,
You've probably
this is the
seen
video
guy.
I was referencing earlier. Yes, this is the exact guy and video.
Okay, yeah, and I just found it really, and he breaks it down. There was someone else that he was working with that broke down what gave you the best advantage in a Pinewood Derby car, and I found it really interesting. The biggest thing that can give you an advantage is where the center of mass of the car is located.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And you want it at the
Because-
front, right? Or is it in the middle?
No, you want, everybody keeps saying it's a little bit less than an inch in front of the rear axle.
Huh.
And the reason
makes
why
sense.
is, because it's on a slope, you want the center of mass as high on the slope as possible, so it has the longest amount of time to go. Because if you have it all in the front and somebody all the way to the back, and they both go down the hill like at the same time,
The one that has
the
to be in the back
one
is still gaining momentum because
gaining
the
momentum,
the
correct.
center of mass is still up high for even a fraction of a second longer. That's going to convert itself into kinetic energy for longer.
Right, correct. Yes, yeah. Yeah, and you can't put it like behind the axle because then it causes it to do a wheelie, and then obviously the back of the car is
Drag.
rubbing against the track. But yeah, so, and I think it said like in most, I couldn't. It's kind of interesting that most of the like races, like the track specifications and like the weight and what you can do with the wheels was kind of up to each different like district.
An organizer.
Yeah, for Cub Scouts. So it's not like regulated, but yeah, 5 ounces is like what I saw the most of. So they like recommended like getting as much of the wood off as possible, and it's like really flat, and then all the weight you put like these little metal, and they said like can't remember if it's like lead or something like that, and you like glue it on the bottom of the car, like right in front of the rear axle.
Put a drop of tungsten on it. That'll do the trick.
Yeah, I think it's tungsten. Yeah, was the non-toxic alternative to lead.
Just float it down.
Tungsten
Yeah,
is freaking expensive though.
Yeah, right. So that's why obviously adults can afford that.
Can you tell me
then-
any more
Yeah, 'cause
about
the
the
last
adult
time-
leagues? Oh wait, sorry, Sarah. Go ahead.
Well, the last time that we did it, before Rona, they were very, very specific about how much your car could weigh. They actually would weigh them in, and they handed you a drill to go bore out some of your wood if it was too heavy, or they handed you washers to tape onto your car if it wasn't heavy enough. So you had all these really cool looking cars that all had washers taped to the top because they were too light.
And there was a
don't
table of
understand
parents
that,
literally
yeah.
butchering the bottoms of it just so it didn't affect the kid's paint job.
Right. Yeah.
We might have taken
That's
part in that bit.
interesting.
Yeah, because like our scale at home was not the same as their scale. So what we weighed at home to fit the specifications was too heavy for theirs. So we stood there with the drill. Not
Yeah,
fun.
and from what the guy said, you like want to get as close to like that 5 ounces or like I was saying, they like each district does regulate it really specifically a certain way, but there wasn't like consistency between like different districts. Like some allow for some other things that I'll get into. Yeah, after like the center of mass, which I found interesting, but then like when they broke it down, like okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is lightweight wheels. So these and a lot of the adults, you can either shave down the wheel to make like the profile slimmer, or buy like custom like 3D printed wheels.
Oh,
that
so
are
going
the
for less
same.
surface area, for less contact,
Right, yeah.
for less frictional drag. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was part of it, and they were also saying because when it's going down the track, some of the energy when going to the track is spent on getting the wheels to start spinning, and the less mass there is on the wheel, the less energy that takes once it gets on that flat part of the track.
Okay.
So you
Okay,
didn't
just-
allow these kits.
So for you listeners, Sarah literally just went and got a pinewood derby car kit out.
Yes, I did.
Yeah, which they come with like that block of wood that's in the dimensions we went over, like
Yeah.
and then 4 like nails as the axles, and then 4 plastic wheels.
Yeah. Now, do different districts or like organizers have different rules on what the wheels can be made of? Do you have to use what comes in the kit box, or does that vary, or are the regulations in regards to being able to modify the wheel, yes or no type thing?
Yeah, I think it's more just being able to modify the wheel. So I might have been wrong earlier. I think it's more that people sell wheels that they've shaved down online, but they all look the same. Yeah, and it's just
Fetching
amazed
top
me.
dollar.
Right, top dollar.
Market for this.
So
I mean, I'll try to
let's
3D
see.
print a Pinewood Derby car, but those wheels are going to be tough.
Right, yeah, because it's really hard to get stuff round.
Well,
Perfectly
if I had a non-FDM printer, I could. But anyway, that's besides the
Right.
point.
Yeah, and we already touched on like aerodynamics, and that was like less important than center mass and lightweight wheels. Which, like, when you tell a kid like how to do what, Sarah?
Well, the adult league's definitely not Scouts, because only official Cub Scout Grand Prix Pinewood Derby wheels and axles are permitted, as
No
per
tungsten.
actual
Oh dang, the kit. Okay,
Yeah.
so at least they have
rules
that.
lawyering.
But back to that video, Jake. Like, yeah, aerodynamics are less important. But one of the things I'm remembering from that video is that the greasing the axles was actually very important.
Yes, greasing, like polishing, yeah, the nails. So like I think like
Yep.
the nails. Do you have like any of the nails in that box, or you just have the instructions for it?
Yeah, I actually have the nails and the wheels because we were actually due to do our Pinewood Derby right before the initial lockdown in March from
Okay, yeah,
COVID. Like, that was the next day was
Yeah,
our
it literally
Pinewood
was the
Derby.
next day.
So I hadn't attached our wheels yet. And yeah, they only allow dry lubricant on the nails.
okay, yeah. So a lot of them
I
were
think-
talking about
graphite.
using like graphite. So basically, like what's in pencil
Yeah.
lead.
Yeah,
as
finely
the
ground
lubricant
graphite.
Yeah,
for 'em.
our machine shop at the high school here, they did a workshop where they actually machine lubricated for all the girls who showed up and to help assemble their cars. But I think you still had to add more graphite to it, like right before you attached.
Yeah, because it'll just kind of flake off. Yeah.
Yeah, and then but they polished the axles. Like, I don't. It's been a long time since I saw that video, but like, doesn't he like attach, like, clamp the nail in like a drill and put some sandpaper around it and just like basically pull the trigger
Yeah,
and
I think,
finally
yeah.
polish it with high grit
That's-
sandpaper?
Yeah,
Yeah,
like he did. Yeah, like
essentially
lower
what
to
they did
higher.
here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I think he had it like an drill press in the
Yeah.
chuck, and then he just did the nail, and then also like the head of the nail kind of like flanged out, so there wasn't as much contact between the wheel and the nail head.
Should be
Yeah,
factors.
Oh, and then
we
the
went
riding
into
the rail.
So much work.
Can you
Yeah,
explain
that was
riding
the-
the rail? Because I remember that it's important, but I don't remember what it's about.
So yeah, and this is where we get into like the things that I don't think a lot of Cub Scout groups allow is bending the axles. So like
I
That's-
have heard of this.
and yeah, riding the rail, and with riding the rail is lifting one wheel. So you only have the two back wheels and one of the front wheels in contact with the track.
Because less friction.
Yeah, it was friction, but the biggest thing was the car, when it goes down the track, ideally you want it to just go down without touching that middle rail that keeps it on the track.
Hmm.
So with like the one wheel and riding the rail is getting the one wheel actually on the rail that's touching the track. You want it to touch the rail so it doesn't bounce back and forth as it's going down, which that causes a lot of energy
momentum,
loss when
yeah.
you get down to the flat part.
Drag.
Yeah. So just keeping it on the rail without bouncing back and forth was a big thing. And you do that by bending the axle nails down on the back one so the wheels go out, and then on the front one it's bent up, I think. So one wheel's
And
touching
you can
it.
just play it off like your kid couldn't nail the nailing straight.
I don't know. Yeah.
I couldn't get them straight again.
Right. Yeah.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, the rear two wheels, the part that's contacting the track is tilted such that the top of
Wider.
the wheel is slightly outward and the inside of the wheel is
it might be the other way actually.
okay.
Yeah, I think I was
so
wrong.
like
Yeah,
the
so
the
out.
way people stance cars. Gotcha.
Right. Yeah. And then on the front, it's the opposite on one of them, and the other one's just lifted off so it doesn't even touch the rail, so that one of the wheels will the car will, like, as it goes down, go to the rail and just stay there because it's kind of like turning left or always turning right. Which,
So
like,
NASCAR,
basically,
Pinewood
yeah.
Derby.
Yeah, if it wasn't
So
for that middle thing, it would just kind of veer to the right or veer to the left.
So the front wheels are
And-
italicized.
Right. Front wheel and
But
the
not
decorative
bold.
wheel. Not bold.
No, you explicitly
shave.
want them not bold. That's why you shave them down.
Super skinny. They're like riding on Oreo cookies.
Right? That's what they, yeah. Don't eat those.
And that's how the cookie crumbles.
You have to start making those taste, add some additive to the wheels so kids don't eat those now. Kyle.
That's just gross.
But yeah, in the same video, yeah, like the guy like kind of proves that like aerodynamics isn't as important by literally taking like the rectangular prism is like the shape of the block and just cutting it into a wedge. And that's the only thing he does as far as aerodynamics. He doesn't sand it or anything, the block of wood. He does all the other things with like the center of the mass, the polished nails, I think they called them cantered wheels.
Yep, that's
They're
it.
at like an
Cantered wheels.
angle, yeah. And the one thing, yeah, you're saying like when you canter the back ones as they're going, they'll kind of push out so they don't try to go in.
Yep.
And they don't make contact with the side of the car where there would be more friction.
Huh.
That's a
So,
super
yeah.
good video. Yeah. I want to hear a bit more about these adult racing leagues, so if I can find anything, I'll add that to the show notes, because I haven't watched that video in like 2 years, but like Adult Pinewood Derby League, as like basement dweller-y as that sounds, also sounds like it could be pretty fun.
I know, yeah, because like, I don't remember exactly like what like the difference in times were between Cub Scout troop racing, and I know they do like heat, so it's like they'll go on each rail of the track and then like average out their times.
Yeah.
But I could imagine like in these adult leagues, like you're talking about like downhill
Fractions of a
skiing, like
second.
fractions of a second time differences. And yeah,
Sounds cutthroat.
and that kind of just like made me think like what are the merits of trying to like perfect something that seems so mundane? Because you have to think, I mean, just kind of interesting to like, because you'd have to research all the physics and test, each different variant and like how much you polish the axles and all that.
I see the merit in taking a concept that is restricted by so many rules and trying to innovate in that space, because working in a restricted space breeds innovation. So I can see where there is attraction to that, and I desperately now want there to be a Twitch channel that is dedicated to Adult Pinewood Derby Leagues, just because I want to see that on a weekly basis and see the wild stuff people come up with. I'm sure there's a YouTube channel or something that I haven't seen, but
yeah, like 8 identical, boring looking cars that all have these different tweaks to it. Yeah.
Yeah, at first I wanted to laugh at this, and now I want to watch it.
Yeah, for real, right? Good stuff.
Yeah, like it's fun watching the kids do it, but man, when somebody takes something to the extreme, it can be pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, obviously like tons of examples. Like I know there was this guy that was trying to perfect like carving a pencil by hand to where like each side of like the face was perfectly
flat.
The same. Like and he would like selling them for like $100 or something after. It's like a piece of art almost, but yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, anytime someone takes something that is otherwise mundane and dedicates their time to doing it absolutely perfectly, it's always a half and half of that's really weird and that's really interesting. I think that this Adult Pinewood Derby Leagues definitely hits that nail right on the head.
Yeah, like
unless they're trying to tell
that polished nail.
Why are you wasting your time? Or like, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of doing, getting that into something? So, yeah, it is very endearing. I find it. At least the Adult Pinewood Derby cars just.
Maybe they're just really preparing for when their kids are Cub Scouts.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that was like
and
one
when
of
their kids make their cars.
Yes. Yeah. Kids make. Yeah. Yeah, I really don't want to see adult rain gutter regattas, but adult Pinewood Derby races is fine. A bunch of middle-aged guys blowing on a sail.
Wasn't there a third one that had like an airplane kind of thing where it was suspended on a wire and you would like have this
Oh yeah, it
like
was
a blade
shaped
on
like a
a
rocket
band, and
ship.
you would twirl it and then release it, and it would go down the wire.
Yeah, I can't remember what that one
What's
was
that thing
called, but yeah, that was a third thing.
So what's the next evolution of the Pinewood Derby? Just as a completely aside, Pinewood Derby comes from Stope Up Racing. What does Pinewood Derby bring to the table? What's next?
Drone races.
3D printed drone races.
Wooden drone races.
Ooh.
Build your own
Come to
drone.
Yeah, I could see that, like the 3D printed, like try to make like the best car using like a certain volume or mass of like plastic. Could
Yeah,
be
and
interesting.
materials. Like,
Yeah.
here's some 3D modeling software. You have to build it within these specs. Like, there are definitely kid accessible 3D modeling solutions. Like Tinkercad by Autodesk is actually insanely accessible. I've never studied a minute of CAD, but I can use Tinkercad without any training. I can definitely see that becoming a thing in 20 years. I'd love to see more education on 3D printing. Anyway, I'm kind of biased, but like that would be
Not
really
at
cool
all.
to see.
Definitely an emerging technology and definitely something that I do not think is going away and is only getting improved upon.
I think getting
Yeah.
kids interested in that in a Cub Scouts or Girl Scouts is worthwhile. Just
Yeah.
as a
Agreed.
kind of a side there.
I think they should have Cub Scout battle bots, but that's just me.
Probably
go,
Boy
that's
Scouts
next.
for
Let's
sure.
all move out to San Francisco.
Right.
Oh God. Right.
Silicon Valley.
Bot fights.
Well, thank you, Jake, for bringing that to the table. I was not expecting that at all, and I am delighted.
And there's our turkey.
There's no.
There's our
that's
second
some-
turkey.
That's like
That's our
some
turkey from a
cranberries
box.
and maybe
About
some
to be
stuffing.
Oh, so that's our box wine.
There you go. Maybe.
Since it
For
came
one.
from a box.
Some people's version of Red
Adult
Box.
Capri Sun.
Adult Caprice.
Yes,
Don't drink it in one sitting. You'll
The big-
regret it.
the big juice box.
Oh yeah, like 34 glasses or something like that. 5 liters of wine.
Oh, God.
No, be
It's a
bad.
sippy cup.
Right.
And to share.
No, you can't just put that on your back like a camelback and use a straw with it.
No, you need to make others regret their decision.
Right.
I am regretting every second we keep going down this hole.
But yeah, I will definitely send the
Moving
link
on,
of
the
that,
stuffing.
the video of the guy getting into all the different details of how to make it ever so faster.
I already have
I'll
the
try to
link.
find a video
I already
of
pulled
the
up
adult-
Mark Rober's YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy who made like the theft deterrent, right? Like the
Yeah.
package.
Yeah, he's,
Yeah.
he has like
Oh,
15
man.
million like subscribers, so yeah, he's really popular. But I thought it was
Yeah,
but he
definitely
seems
check out Mark
sincere.
Rober.
So
He's very sincere. He builds a lot of cool stuff, like a giant
Yeah.
trampoline to drop stuff off a 45-meter tower onto, such as a car.
yeah,
But no, I'll definitely link that in the show notes. That's a really good video that I'd completely forgotten about. I actually looked at it last year when we were getting ready to do our Pinewood Derby cars last year in 2019. So,
You mean these cars right here?
no.
Wooden.
I mean the cars that actually got to race.
So that
Oh.
was. Yeah, I guess it was 2019.
Yeah.
Man, this year's wild.
This year is weird.
What day is it?
it's barely a year.
Yeah, I know.
It's almost December.
It's the year where every day feels like a week and every month goes by in the blink of an eye. All right. So, for our next bit, Sarah, you either had a discussion you want to bring up, or I can bring us a quick bit of filler. Some bread
Mine's
rolls.
filler. No, mine's bread. You can't bring more bread. It's my
Stuffing.
bread.
I will bring a different variety of bread than yours.
Dinner
Alright, so
roll.
what bread is yours?
It's yours rolls, biscuits, crescent rolls.
Yeah, we got croissant.
Tortillas?
Tortillas
Pitas?
for turkey rolls.
That would be amazing. Just a plate. I brought a plate of homemade tortillas. We're not having any other Mexican food here.
I guess I'll put.
Turkey tacos.
I guess I'll put these mashed potatoes.
Hey, don't
on there.
knock turkey tacos. Those are delicious.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I like ground turkey tacos, but yeah, like turkey
yeah,
fajitas would be interesting.
Would be interesting. Make you go to sleep. Have your fiesta, then your siesta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I've heard it's more about just carb overload than the tryptophan that's in the turkey.
Is that a whole different episode? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yes.
That's a whole different episode. for
Tryptophan
sure.
has like a small contributing factor, but it's mostly just because you eat so much, and it's
Yeah.
carb overload.
Oh, carb overload will make you nap.
And just
As
the
we can
stress of
all tell
dealing
you
with
from
certain family members.
all right, in a normal year, all of us would have passed out at our annual gathering right after mealtime for about 20 minutes
Oh,
and
yeah.
all woken up and played board games.
Yeah, because we're hyper like that, and we like to stay over for
Or
like
it's nice
6 or
out,
7
like our
hours.
moms being like, "Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a walk." I don't want to.
No,
I
let's
am
play
cutting
games.
this entire segment because our mothers listen to this show.
But they love us.
They love us, but they don't want
They know
us
it's
dunking on
true.
them on this show. I'm going to have to edit around this so bad.
We're not dunking. We're
Speaking of dunking, let's dunk that roll into some gravy.
It's
Oh.
donuts.
it's
This
stuffing time.
This is all unusable.
Yep. Sprinkle sage on that.
And by
So-
all you mean since we started it. 10:30.
And the thing is, I'm going to forget to edit this bit out, even though I'll be listening through it.
That's amazing.
Sorry, Mom.
We love you.
We love you.
Thanks for the content warning at the beginning. This episode is not for
May
moms.
offend
Not for
mom.
mother. Mother, stop listening right now. Take off your headphones.
All right,
If
before
you're
we
my
do-
mom, stop listening.
Jeez.
Through my mom.
So before we derail this episode any further, definitely getting this Thanksgiving energy in here tonight.
You want to stay on the rail.
So
Yeah, no, you don't want to touch the rail. You want to be in the groove, not the rail. So your car keeps going.
and the
Just eat the Oreo
self-referential
already.
bits come. So no, something I wanted to bring to everybody's attention real quick is just this is an article that came from Forbes. I think in the past couple of weeks, November 21st was the last update on it. So, out of cool technologies that are kind of outside our wheelhouse that I found really interesting, there is a 2-acre vertical farm that outproduces 720-acre flat farms. That is coming up, I believe it's San Francisco. Let me double check. It's somewhere in California. Yeah, San Francisco. It has a farm in San Francisco. So it's dubbed Tigress. It's basically it's one of many startups. There are about 5 startups that are coming about to build fully indoor vertical farms that are managed mostly by AI, machine learning, and robots. And they have these giant pillars with basically soil packed in the middle, and they grow all the rows are vertical and like 2 feet apart from each other. And you have, I guess the idea is crawler bots go up there and pick this stuff. It is wild looking. It's all lit by LEDs. It's all temperature controlled. And can operate year round, but it's doing it in 2 acres. It's growing as much food in 2 acres as you could in 720 acres flat. I saw this and it's just wild. Let me get you guys this link real quick.
I found it. Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, I have it.
Yeah, because I've heard of vertical farming, but not using robots to do the picking. So are we talking hydroponics or grow tubes for these vertical farms?
I believe this is more on the hydroponics side. This is something I just got a cursory view on. I'm going to leave a link in the show notes for sure. But the whole point of this environment is just in the spirit of the automation age, ruthless gains in efficiency and providing every benefit to the plants that you can. One of the keys, of course, is being de-stressing plants. You don't want them exposed to too much heat or too much cold, or too much rain, too little rain. So the idea is they have sensors all over the place, so they can tell this group of plants needs a little bit more water. But also the water use is greatly reduced because everything that isn't absorbed is drawn out through the bottom of these vertical columns. They use 95% less water total and take up 99% less space than a comparable conventional flat farm. there's a there's a lot of other advantages too. The benefits potentially are massive. 400 times greater yield per acre of ground is not just an incremental improvement, but it using almost 2 orders of magnitude less water is like critical, especially in regions like California where they regularly have droughts. Like centers like this are by their very nature drought resistant because they're using less water and the plants aren't stressed out from the drought conditions, massive winds, massive heat waves, or anything like that. And again, they're safe from, for the most part, ostensibly, they're safe from things like wildfires, especially on the West Coast.
Wildfire and the effects of it, the ash and whatnot.
I guess, yeah, if you're saying it's like enclosed, it'd be more efficient for organic farming, like where they're not trying to use pesticides and herbicides.
Yeah, because you again, it's a sealed environment, but like,
right,
especially in high density population centers like the major cities, having stuff grown so close to where it would be distributed is also a big advantage because you don't have the travel time of things being grown in, say, the Midwest and then being shipped, across the country 3,000 miles. If you can grow them in the city or in the same city district and then ship to stores that locally, that's a major advantage. It has a lot of benefits for providing fresh foods in places where you can't normally get things that are that fresh. And if you buy fresh, you've got to use it in 2 or 3 days because it's going to spoil because I already spent a week in shipping.
Right, you don't have to pay somebody to ship it across the country, and you're not using as many fossil fuels shipping it to start either, which that has a lot of advantages.
Yeah, so I'm just going to link this article, and there's a podcast where he interviewed the creators of one of these startups. But it's just conceptually, I want to talk about this conceptually because we live in southern Illinois where there is a lot of flat farms. Hell, the town that Sarah and I live in, we're surrounded by farms, like
corn and beans everywhere.
Corn and soy everywhere. Like, I don't think flat farms are going away. I think it's more a major advantage for dense population centers and growing closer to where it's being distributed and reducing the potential for food shortages of any kind. Like, in America, we eat more meat per capita than any other nation. But, like, in terms of a balanced diet, like, fruits and vegetables and grains are crucial. And I think there's a lot of advantages for dense population centers specifically. And given the yield per acre, I could see it potentially overtaking some areas where flat farming happens but isn't efficient. So, it's just really neat.
Just putting up the initial capital seems to be a lot of the issues that startups like this face, because this is a revolutionary idea. I'm sure the concept's been around for a while, but actually putting it in action, especially with the kind of monitoring power that we have, that's, you're growing something in a completely controlled environment.
Yep.
And if you can really pull a good yield off of that, you're going to see dividends like crazy. But just putting up that initial capital is probably going to try to drive some people away, and I hope that's not going to be the case. I for once want to see one of these things succeed.
Yeah, this isn't a new concept actually. Again, using robots, that part seems new, but there's systems where in a greenhouse they'll have like these 4-foot rafts with a bunch of little holes in it where they'll plant stuff like lettuce that's really easy and quick to grow. They'll plant it and it will be completely soilless. They'll have this raft planted this day and it just kind of floats along, and as it grows it gets to the next stage, and at the end they just gotta like pluck the little the plant root and all out, and they can reuse the rafts for the next batch, and it's like 4 weeks to grow. But in their systems, they've even include like fish tanks at the end so that um, the fish fertilize the water and they just cycle that water through the plants to give it the nutrients. And they do some pretty cool stuff with these completely enclosed environments that they can make.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I may have misspoke earlier when I said something about soil because I need to make it clear what you're describing is vertical farming by definition, but this isn't like tiered troughs. This is literal pillars of plant matter.
Oh, yeah, and they take the rafts, and once they've reached a certain age, they stick them in a tray where it's got the grow lights, and then it finishes its cycle.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I
These
left
look
that
like
part out.
these are pillars that have the grow lights basically built into them, and they're arranged in a way such that the light from any one pillar is lighting a couple other pillars adjacent to it. It's really, really cool looking. Again, I'm gonna have this in the show notes because it is bonkers cool. But I do think it is a soilless situation, like you were saying, and that's part of how they get the reduced water consumption as well. As it's not just soaking into the soil and being evaporated back out. It's literally basically raining on these roots
Mhm.
and then being recycled back into the system. Which is again, it's this is super cool. Like this is the kind of things that says again we're living in the future for real. Um,
Yeah. You have to be careful. You are limited by which plants can survive in that kind of environment, but if you can find the niche for it and find just the right plant, you can really profit off of it once you get past that hurdle of initial capital.
Yeah, it's billions of dollars in investment, but there are over 1,600 startups for this vertical farming stuff. But I think it's Tigris is the farm they're constructing, which a farm under construction is a wild statement. But like, there's tens of billions of dollars of investment going into this exact field where you're using AI and robotics to analyze and treat the plants. And let's be clear, they are doing like fruits and vegetables of all varieties here because they can control climate zones within these environments to make it amicable to anything you can think of. It doesn't matter where in the world it is. You can create the environment to grow whatever you need. Like with something like this, I can grow Florida oranges in New York State. You know, you can reduce scarcity and reduce prices on things that conventionally have to be grown in a certain place by growing it locally. Like heck, I'll get coffee beans from the same belt near the equator. With this, we could potentially grow coffee in the Arctic even if we had the right temperature control systems and power delivery in place. It's just what it could do for reducing hunger, and world hunger is a real issue. What it could do for reducing food storages and making food more readily available in parts of the world where conventional farming isn't viable. It's just very amazing. I'm very interested to see where it goes.
All for it.
Yeah, and like especially if you can like reduce like the footprint of like all the flat farms and just let some of that go back to nature for like preserves and stuff, it'd kind of be interesting as well to see if that would be another benefit of it.
Yeah, for sure. And like,
Or if they just high density all the farms.
Right, yeah, and then just all that other land just goes back to who knows
but like,
native species. Yeah,
let's be real. People live in cities. Like the big cities are where almost half of any civilized nation lives. If you can reduce the farmland around that and make it more accessible, you can reduce housing costs even by making more housing available close to the city that would normally
right.
otherwise be taken up by farms that need to be that close because there's something that can only grow in that climate zone. You know,
Well, and it could also revitalize cities that are plagued with, blight. All these empty buildings, empty warehouses, you repurpose it for this. You've got a grow center in the middle of your town where it's been an empty building for 10 years
yep.
Yeah,
and
a lot of
it's
like the yeah.
breeds jobs and local food source, and maybe that's what people need.
Yeah, maybe it is. As long as those buildings that you're tearing down or repurposing, most likely tearing down and building new facilities, aren't like historically protected or something. That's like a reason we see a lot of blight in St. Louis is because it's a historic part of the city that no one wants to live in anymore. But I digress. That's another issue. I just thought this was really cool, something to look at and bring people's attention to because, like, in 10, 20 years, this is probably the kind of place you're going to get your food from.
I sure hope so.
And it'll be
Yeah,
local.
that's interesting.
And it'll be more efficient. So,
Yeah.
like, is it kind of part of the endless march to get humans out of the workforce? Maybe a little bit. Does it have real tangible benefits to human beings as well? Definitely. Definitely.
I'm really enjoying this vertically grown green bean casserole. Delicious.
Segway.
Segway.
That's another thing on our Thanksgiving table. Delicious.
A Segway? Ugh.
Wait, no,
What's
we're
that?
not eating a Segway. Who brought a Segway in here? Get that out of here. That's not food.
It's not the robot
Get out
we
of
want.
here, Paul Blart.
Alrighty. And I think, well, Sarah, you're the only one who hasn't brought anything. What's for dessert?
I guess I've got dessert. More food for thought than
Ooh.
anything.
But I'm hungry.
Kind of. Well, that's tough. You can snack later. We're working here. This goes along with our last episode about games and the values. What do you feel is too much freedom for a player? And do you have any situations of where a game did it right or did it way wrong where, say, an action is rewarded or a player has a consequence, good or bad, based on their choices, or just no reaction from the game world at all?
So what is too much? What is the right amount of player agency, or where might it be too much? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so, like, for an example, a game that I think kind of was on the right track would be like the Fable games, where based on your choices, something in the world reacts to you differently. But then there's other games where you can do some very morally and ethically questionable actions and never face any consequences for it. I think that list is far too long to bring up. But what do you guys, where do you draw the line for, like, what is the right amount of player freedom?
I think as a basic example, a game that does player freedom right. I have two games that come to mind that we've played to death, and we mentioned last week: Minecraft and Skyrim. Minecraft gives the player the creative freedom, even in survival mode, to do whatever it is they want to do. I mean, you have dangers you have to face, but functionally, if you can build it within the confines of the game, it will work. Can you make things that will make your computer crash? Yes. You have done that in particular on our local Minecraft server back in the day. You literally brought it to a grinding halt with an automation system you made.
Oh yes, and that was a joyous machine, but had no consequence. So I would say Minecraft does not treat does not give the right amount of character freedom as far
I'd
as
say it does, because you get out of it what you put into it, and I think within the confines of the game as it was designed, that's fine. But I think a better example is something like Skyrim. And I'm bringing up Skyrim for two particular reasons. If you do
Is it
something...
because I play it too much? Because we can have that talk later.
No. So in terms of player agency, and newer games may do this better. I don't play a lot of newer games anymore because I don't have time. But like, if you commit a crime in a town and someone sees you, there is a repercussion. There may be a fine to pay, depending on how severe the offense was. If And it gives you this system where if you're out of town and nobody sees it, you don't have a consequence. It incentivizes you to react differently to different environments, and it kind of guides the player agency. But it also it's a game that explicitly disallows certain things. Like, there are kids in the game, you can't harm them. Like, it's taking a moral stance of, hey, this really shouldn't be allowed, and this is something everybody can agree shouldn't be allowed, so we're not going to allow it. I think a developer, the right amount of agency is however much agency they can give a player while not breaking the game entirely, like Minecraft does, but while also like having respect to a baseline moral code that everybody can agree upon. Like, that's my answer from those examples. There is such a thing as too much, as if it's too much if it harms the player experience, or if it goes against like the very, very baseline moral code that everybody can agree to.
At least has to have those attributes. Otherwise, you're left with a game that's more of a blank canvas that doesn't have those kinds of that kind of challenge for you to not step over a boundary like that. It's at least has to have those.
Like we talked about last week, boundary testing is a big part of fun, and unless you have boundaries to come up against and to test, if you have boundaries that you can go up against and are defined and you can test, that adds another layer of discovery to a game, right?
Yeah.
You also have to consider things like a baseline of ethics and a baseline of player experience.
Right, yeah. Because I think, yeah, like for me, like thinking of two examples where one doesn't probably do it right and the other does. Like immediately when you came up with this, like Grand Theft Auto is a not good example of this, because in that game, I mean, every single person on there you can murder, and unless it's like a character that's important to the story, as long as you get away from like this radius that the game makes of the police force or the law enforcement in the game, as long as you get away from it, you're good. If you see a policeman after that, they don't stop you. So there's not like any kind of like record you get, I don't think, at least the ones I've played. Like once you go back into, the city. So yeah, that game just doesn't give you any type of boundaries as far as that's concerned. One I think that, and this is probably mostly recency bias because I'm playing it right now, but the Assassin's Creed series is also like an open world game, and you play an assassin. But the whole concept of the game is you're somebody in modern times who's hooked up to this computer that somehow uses like your ancestors' DNA so you can like relive their life. And most of them, you're reliving the life of like a assassin in this world. And in that game, if you try to, you're only supposed to like kill like soldiers or your targets, but if you try to kill, you can kill a citizen, but if you do it like too often in a row, it'll say you desynced because your ancestor did not kill, innocent civilians. And I found that, like that's a really interesting way of kind of like, yeah, you have freedom to do it, but if you do it too much, you get pulled out of it. And then it just makes you reload.
That's an interesting game over.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And I think it does it for like domesticated animals too, so you can't just like go around and kill people's dogs.
Well, that's good.
But yeah, it is good. But it's just, an interesting way of like, dealing with like letting you have freedom, but if you do it, there's a consequence.
Yeah, de-incentivizing certain courses of action through gameplay elements, I think, is a good call. Like, that's why I'm a fan of Skyrim's model of, if you do something and people know about it, you're going to face consequences. Guards are going to come after you if you have a high enough bounty or if you're considered dangerous enough. Or they'll just try to outright kill you on sight at a certain point.
Right, yeah.
And then you have to roll back to a save where you're not... You haven't been, like, blasting the cities to oblivion. No pun intended for Elder Scrolls fans.
Oh,
but
that felt intended.
it wasn't. I promise. But like again, it's what can the developer what tools can the developer give the player without overstepping moral boundaries, without breaking their own game for their customers and thus taking away from the experience, and while still keeping suspense of disbelief intact. Because like it's not like in the case of like killing random dogs, you can't just have a pop-up that says, hey, don't do that, that's going to break the experience. But by making it a mechanic, or having somebody in universe saying, oh, you distinct from the timeline because your ancestors didn't do that, that's a better, I feel like that's a really good way of handling it.
Right, yeah. And there's certain like like it kind of restricts like the map too, like, oh, your ancestor never went to that place, which normally it's like, oh, they don't want to program more area because they have to limit that somehow. But yeah, just I think that is like an interesting story mechanic they can lean on to help streamline the game.
And solve that problem. I like
Neat.
that.
Yeah.
I think the most ultimate, the ultimate de-incentivizing of just really having bad actions is having your character killed off completely. Like, as in, like, you cannot play the character, especially if you created that character. Like, that's something that we see, you know, outside of video games in Dungeons and Dragons. If
Oh yeah.
you're in complete control of, you know, not doing stupid stuff and getting your character killed, because if your character's killed, they're dead
That's it.
forever. That's it.
And that's
Do not
just
see
in that's just in media res. Like let's talk about outside the game. At a game like D&D where it's run by multiple people, just being a dick as a character for the sake of being a dick, it will get you kicked out of a group. Like straight up.
Oh
Like
yeah.
there are other social effects in that context, but in the context, I think, so we're talking specifically in the context of video games, yeah.
I don't know. We can take it to other tabletop games. Let's
That being
do it.
said, that being said, isn't there a mechanic like that in World of Warcraft? Whenever the paid servers were around, or was that actually
in live servers? Oh, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Where you had the we talked about that last.
You had a
week.
reputation.
Like,
Okay.
Back in the days when you were limited to your server, you built a reputation, and you had the consequences, that de-incentivization to be a bad actor was your status as a community member, and that's something that largely doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And I think the limiting of player agency to de-incentivize bad actors is actually a good reason to go back to that model. I know that from a certain standpoint, that's not something people want. People like being able to play with their friends, and it's not going to happen because going back to that model will lose people money. But like I said last time, I think that's something that's definitely been lost. But if you can't enforce that from a social perspective, like you can with D&D, or like you used to be able to do with MMOs, I think handling bad actions within the context of the game, from the game itself, is kind of the right way to handle bad actions. And as far as good actions, just reward players reasonably and give them as many tools as you can, granted the technology available. I think that's kind of the right limit, because like people aren't going to complain about having too much to do, I don't think. I may be in the wrong on that. That's just
no,
opinion.
no, I think you're right. You know, real actions that you make should have either positive or negative consequences for the outcome of another part of a game. For example, I mean, this is really basic level, but I just had a memory of playing SSX 3. It was either SSX 3 or SSX Tricky, and the more you would try to fight other people or like push them down and stuff, their attitudes would change, and you would see it by this little floating exclamation point above them. If it got more red, they would be more likely to come and try to attack you and push you down. So it was incentivized that you would play fair with these other people, and so that you wouldn't get pushed down by everyone, and they would instead try to push other people down.
So basically, if you're a jerk to them, they will be a jerk to you right back and start like playing dirty with you. It disincentivizes playing dirty by making the game play dirty back at you.
Yeah, it's almost it's
There
kind of
we
like a
give.
Like
a
it's really
version of like a
basic, but I loved that so
it's kind of like a
much.
tilt sensor on a pinball machine where like if you know rock the boat too much, it's just
Yeah,
gonna the
Yes,
game's gonna fall
I love
apart.
it.
Yeah,
yeah.
pinball setting that boundary right.
right.
Getting
Don't
in the
rock the
game
boat.
early.
I think that's like
Yeah, I
kind
know
of
about
like
that.
the tilt sensor is a great example of the genesis of a game telling you, "Hey, you're not allowed to do that," as the game, rather than having a person come and say you can't do that. I think the tilt sensor is kind of like the first thing that actually did that.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
when do people listen to people?
Exactly.
yeah, and then some people just want to be contrarian, so the more you say don't do it, they just want to do it.
But if the
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
if the
it's a
game the
challenge.
medium you're trying to interact with is actively combating you when you do a thing, you're not going to combat it anymore because you're not going to be able to enjoy it.
Right, yeah.
Well, you're
'cause-
gonna try, but you're gonna fail.
Yeah.
Gosh, all the fighting, like not really fighting, but just the annoyances of people uh that got into glitches early, like when we were playing Fall Guys, for example.
Yeah.
Just like the player agency should really just be confined within the game, not necessarily your choices outside of it, like mods. I
Yeah.
it bugs me as soon as it really crosses that point, because you're removing the fun from everyone else, because everyone starts OG with a standard, and if you change that in any way to give you an unfair advantage, I mean that's the biggest part of where I draw the line, is just being
Being an
awful
online
like that.
multiplayer. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one point in experimenting. There's another in trying to use it to gain a competitive edge.
Okay, so here's a question on that note. So, exploiting multiplayer games, obvious no-go, crossing lines.
Yep.
What about exploiting within the rule set of a single player game, where it's not affecting other people, but it's affecting your individual gameplay?
What, like a handicap?
Well, we're not talking Mario Party here. We're talking like
Mario Party.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about
We're
it.
talking
like you
about
find
yeah.
Ocarina of Time, the Gold Skulltula glitch, where you could farm the one over and over again, something like that. It is in the game. It is exploitable, but is that okay?
Or like the missing no glitch on Pokemon Red
Yes.
and Blue. Yeah,
I think that comes down to each person. If that's your definition of fun, that's fine. However, there's also the other side of that coin, where it's still, in some cases, like the Skulltula glitch, you're cheating the system to not have to do things you would otherwise have to do to get certain rewards. I think, generally speaking, it's a moral code thing. It's one thing if it's you're doing it for fun and to explore the boundaries of the game. It's another thing entirely. It comes down to intent when it comes to something like that. Are you trying to cheat through the game and get rewards early, or are you exploring the boundaries of the game just to explore them and not actually exploiting? Because there's a difference between exploitation and exploration when it comes to things like glitches and testing the technical constraints of a game, right?
Yeah, like if you find a glitch, whether you're going to continue using it on purpose versus, oh, I found this, I'm going to leave it alone.
I think a good example of that would be the speedrunning community. Some glitches are considered, like in speedrunning, the entire objective is to complete the game as quickly as possible, and a lot of glitches are allowed. That's why we have the any percent categories. However, even within the any percent where anything goes, there are still certain glitches that are disallowed because they go against the spirit of beating the game in general. A great example is Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. There was a hard limit on how quickly you could complete that game. But somebody discovered a series of a glitch where if you moved in a certain way in certain places, it would set certain values in memory, and then if you performed an action after doing all this setup, you would get a debug level select menu that was basically like it didn't display right, but if you used a certain button combination after this debug menu came up, it took you to the final boss. And that was immediately disallowed because that goes against the spirit of speedrunning, because you're not abusing the game's mechanics at that point. You're basically
You're literally
programming
going
the system
backdoor.
to give you a backdoor to the end level. So that method is disallowed. I think it comes down to intent and the application of that intent. And that's up to your individual moral compass. And you still have to keep in mind that how you decide to play that, especially if it's like a kid playing it. I think if it's a kid playing it and you see the kid doing that, you should discourage like the exploiting to get around things, because that's going to teach them poor value systems. But when you're at our age, like you're an adult or above, it's really depends on kind of what your definition of fun is and what your moral compass is like.
Yeah, you should know right from wrong already.
Yeah, for sure.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Now, in the speed running community, I know that it is generally discouraged and against the spirit of speed running, but there are certain categories that are just beat the game as fast as possible, and I've
Yeah,
seen
but
that in all the different Mario Karts and such,
yeah.
any which goes, yeah.
Well, I want to actually address that, because Majora's Mask was the same way too. But what they did was they moved the character in a way to get a menu to go to a place, rather than
Yeah.
in something like Mario Kart where you're just breaking boundaries and glitching through walls and stuff. You're still playing the game. But when you're at the point where you're playing the game a very specific way to unlock a menu to skip for you, and unlocking a piece of developer code to just click a button in a menu to go somewhere, that was seen as going against the spirit, because you weren't just getting a warp to a wrong location. Wrong warps, which is moving a certain way to set a value in memory and then going through a door that would change maps and going to a different map, that's generally allowed. But getting a menu to do it, that's where kind of the line got drawn, and that was based on a moral decision from the community. In Mario Kart, you're just glitching through walls and abusing boosts.
That's
I'm
just
sorry.
an extreme example. Okay, I see.
Yeah, I mean, like that kind of reminded me of I remember seeing this article about a guy watching their son play on a Switch, like the NES classic, like Mario's, and I think all the games on there, because you can actually do a save state on like the NES classics on
Yep.
the Switch, and then he kept seeing his son like reload it, and it kind of made him think like, does that take away from like? I mean, obviously it makes the game easier. But it's like, as long as the son's enjoying it, again, like, where's that line? Like, does that take away from the value of the game, or was it just like a technological limitation at the time that now that we have save states, it makes it, easier
Well,
or
it's
more
not even
fun?
save states. On the Switch, you can actually rewind in real time
Right.
and then try
Yeah.
again. And
Right. Yeah.
the Nintendo justification is, back in the day, you sold games that were like, if you actually play them straight through perfectly, like 2 hours long, and they made them brutally difficult and have game overs and stuff, so it would take longer for people to complete them. And
Right.
the stated reason that they have that rewind system is so players can enjoy it without being stressed out by it. And again, it comes down to intent. Am I rewinding because I'm struggling? Because if you're rewinding and loading again, it's basically the same as any game we have today, where you're allowed to try ad nauseum. That's not cheating by any definition, I don't
Right.
think. Right?
Yeah.
If I fail
No.
and then I rewind and go back to where I was and try again, it's not like cheating where I'm like, again, pulling up a menu to skip something. It's adjusting those types of games for the modern age, where we can retry from 3 steps back rather than restarting the whole game. That's I think that's just a modernization mechanic, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know how, that if that applied to it. And I think to some extent it does, but
Definitely.
not as bad as, exploiting
Yeah, no.
glitches.
I feel like because it was included in the Switch itself, that this is something that is more okay than it used to be, because it's
Right.
not necessarily a mod or like a
Like a cheat.
An adjustment someone has made outside of the constructs of the Switch. This is something that they put in.
Yeah, specifically to make it more accessible. It's an accessibility feature at the end of the day.
Exactly.
And I don't think any of us would speak out against making things more accessible to people.
Mm-hmm.
No, but how do you feel about the ability to time travel by adjusting your system time on the Switch?
All right, that's
Oh,
it for this
Animal
episode. Good night,
Crossing
everybody. No, I think that comes down to your own moral compass and having your own fun. Like, you paid for the game, and if you want to time travel in a game that is dependent on a real-time clock, that's your decision.
Yeah, just don't expect other people to be behind it if they're playing fair.
Yeah, it's a very opinionated topic, and it's down to the individual. Like, we're talking explicitly about Animal Crossing, which has events that take place on certain dates.
Oh, so now we're explicit. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll call it out, but like, I think at the end of the day, it's let people have their own fun. Don't get on people for not time traveling if they want to play the game the way it was intended. On the other side, if people paid for the game and they have the ability to adjust the clock and have their fun, I don't think they should be disparaged for that either. Do I agree with it? Yeah. Do I engage in time traveling? No, because that's not in the spirit of the game, which is something I value. But if somebody else doesn't have a lot of time to play the game and actually cares to see all those things from the days they can't play it, it's their game. They pay for it. Yeah, exactly. You had to bring a topic I was very opinionated in. It wouldn't be Thanksgiving unless we were arguing about something highly opinionated.
We have to argue over dessert. Which dessert is best, pumpkin pie or pumpkin pie cheesecake dip?
Pumpkin pie.
Cheesecake dip. They're all so good. I just want them all. Yes.
Pumpkin pie in pumpkin cheesecake dip.
Just put pumpkin pie cheesecake dip on top of your pie.
Mm-hmm.
There we go.
More is better. Cat in a hat is cool.
Where's that wine box?
Jake's got it.
Jake's got it. His Pinewood Derby wine box. Alrighty, I'm really happy with how this turned out. It's a bit weird for us to not have a topic predetermined, and I really do like this smorgasbord format.
Surprise!
I think this is a lot more fun and more interactive, and I hope that you, the listener, enjoy this as well. This has been a lot of fun for us. And I hope it's in the spirit of Thanksgiving, because that's kind of what we were. I don't know, this might be a format we revisit in the future. I super enjoyed this, and I like having these types of discussions where we can just bring something to the table and talk about it. This is definitely felt a lot more like Thanksgiving and was a lot more fun. So thank you guys.
Yeah, not knowing kind of thinking on the fly about the topics that get brought up. I enjoy that.
Yeah, again, we're in this is the sixth episode of the show that we've done besides the special 7th episode. Like, we're still feeling out the format, and I think this will probably be the format we fall to if we don't have time to do a lot of research on one topic or don't have a really good topic to discuss. Yeah. So, hey, we might even do this over the rest of the holiday season as everybody's busy and just trying to stay sane out there.
Good luck.
Next episode, Stockholm Syndrome.
No.
And stockings.
No, just kidding.
We actually have no idea what the topic's going to be. I'm not going to promise anything at this point.
No,
I've learned my lesson in promising things.
Bronzing.
I do want to do the history of YouTube at some point, but I honestly at this point can't tell you if it's going to happen before the end of the holiday season. But we want to wrap this up, guys.
Wrap this up for Christmas.
Wrap it up for Christmas.
Hey, everybody's got Christmas trees up now. Let's wrap up this episode in a little box and send it on its way. So thank you so much for listening to We Might Be Nerds. This has been a lot of fun. We've enjoyed that. We will have links for every topic except the kind of in discussion there in the show notes, unless Sarah and I can find anything on the topic of player agency, how much is too much or too little. But everything will be in the show notes at WeMightBeNerds.com. If you want to find us on social media, we only have a Twitter at this point. It's at MightBeNerdsPod. If you want to send us an email, you can be reached at WeMightBeNerdsPod@gmail.com. And that's going to do it for us this week. We'll be back on 2 weeks on, I believe it is December, is it 14th? It's going to be the 14th of December will be the next episode. Until then, stay safe out there and have a good holiday season. Thanks for listening. I've been Dylan Critchfield.
I'm Kyle Montgomery.
I'm Jacob Montgomery.
I'm Sarah Critchfield. And if you enjoyed this episode,
you might be a nerd too. We'll see you next time.